What's up, everybody? Happy Christmas Eve. Yeah, this is what Christmas Eve looks like in Georgia. Sunny, beautiful, 57 degrees out. It's nice. We get to ride our bikes and stuff. People up north are probably shoveling snow. What's there to talk about? I mean, there's like the year in review. My year was okay. There's the review. Not much going on. I mean, I got this. Almost done with the mods. We got the longer chain, got the crash protection, got the ECU flash, got the modified stock exhaust to give us a good sound without being obnoxious, and also the benefit of it being free. Got a nice throaty roar to it. Sounds good. I don't see the point in changing it. And the only mod left is I'm going up one tooth in the rear sprocket. I know I said before, the stock gearing's perfect. Adding the length to the swing arm, well, not the swing arm, but just the chain. It's got the adjusters back just a tiny bit further. Like, they're okay, but if the chain stretches, which it will from a bike making 187 or whatever the hell this thing's putting out, horsepower, I'm going to be like near the end of the adjustment. So I was like, well, you can't like only go up one link. It's always got to be even numbers. So rather than go back to stock and have that short wheelbase, which just makes it crazy wheelie prone, I was like, well, I could take up a little bit of the slack, just enough to make the difference if I went from a 41 tooth rear to a 42. So we're going up one tooth in the back, which will have the effect of lowering my gearing a tiny bit. I don't know if it'll be enough to notice. When I ran the calculations on Gearing Commander, which, by the way, if you don't use Gearing Commander, you should. You put in the size of your tires, your sprocket sizes, chains for your bike, all that stuff, and it runs all the math to let you know, like, if you do this sprocket set, how much will it throw your speedo off at this speed, and how much, if you're cruising in 6, here's the RPM different. Like, it gives you all that stuff, and it also tells you and calculates out your top speed if you're hitting the rev limiter or whatever you set as your RPM limit. How fast will the bike actually be going? Now, there could be a variance because, well, your tire may be taller than another, or, things like that. But as long as you get the dimensions in there right, your speed will be more accurate than your speedo by far. Because due to the circumference of the tire changing, maybe because it's worn, and so it's like 3 millimeters shorter than it was when you bought it, that's going to be, 1% or a fraction of a 1% off. Your factory speedo is off at least minimum of 5%. And it's always, always high. So when your speedometer says 100, you're maybe doing 95 at best. You're probably doing 93 or 94. And on older bikes, like older GSXRs, 600, 750s, that's off more like 8%. And if you did the speeding, if you change your gearing to get more acceleration, which most 600 guys do, your speedo could be off 18%. So at 100 on the speedo, you're actually only going 82. When it says 180, you're doing 140 something or 150 something. So, which leads me to my next thing. I was talking to Cameron about this, and he thought I was being petty, but I just, certain things get under my skin. A lot of big things that just roll off me. But when I see guys flexing, it's not that, it's flexing, they're bragging, whatever, I don't care. If you got a Turbo Busa and you want to flex with that, hey, it's a Turbo Busa, go for it, man. But the guys who just make shit up, it's like, I'm sitting there at Mr. Popo, sitting there at Cycle Gear, and last week I was in the car, and there's a guy in an older R1. I don't know, maybe like an 09. It was one of the last models before they went to the cross plane crank. So I think it was one of the 5-valve motors. Great bike, stock. They made like high 140s at the wheel with a pipe and a tune. You could wide pipe. You could probably get them up to 160. certainly fast, capable bikes. And actually, I think they look better than the newer ones. But they, him and there was a guy on a 750, Gixxer 750. It's a few years old. Had to pull up alongside him at a red light. We're all headed to Cycle Gear. Didn't know them. They didn't know each other or me. And we go and we hit the red light, and I put it in race mode and launch control. And it digs in and goes, and they're fighting wheelies. And I basically just kept pace and even would have pulled a little bit on him if I hadn't been in manual mode. If I'd actually, I put it down in launch control, but I left the paddle shifters on. And I forgot, so I banged into the rev limiter, forgot to shift. Oh shit, I got to shift, so that delayed me a second. So actually off the line, they're sitting there fighting wheelies, because, you know, you can say, well, motorcycles do 0 to 60 in 2.7. Yeah, but almost nobody can actually do that. If you're on a prep surface, and you're like a really good rider, and you're, you know, if you're Chris Moore, you're on your game, yeah, you might be able to do that on a stock bike. Most riders can't do that. Their 0 to 60 because of fighting wheelies and shit is over 3 seconds. My car is under. So the guy on the R1 was kind of impressed. He's like, that's not even a Z06, and he's like, that thing was keeping pace. I'm like, yeah, and it's like, cars are fast today. And so we go, and he's like, you know, what kind of other bikes you run across? And I'm like, every 600 I've ever raced against in that car, I've beaten. I can spit them out off the line easily, and they'll almost keep pace in the mid-range, but once you get up into triple digits, the 600 starts running out of steam. Yeah, ultimately they can hit 155, 160 maybe, but the car's aerodynamics kick in, and I just slice through the wind. And you know, if they're a fat guy and not on a tuck, and if they got a backpack on, you know, all that stuff factors in. It isn't a factor in a car. The car is aerodynamic. It's designed in a wind tunnel. Motorcycles might be, but riders are not. So, right up here at this red light, going from that red light up the hill, over the hill, I raced a 750 a few weeks ago. And off the line, just whoosh, got four or 4.5 car lengths, so like a bus length or more ahead of him. And I stayed ahead of him. And then as we got around 140, I started pulling away from him, and he just went and rolled off. And we all pulled over in the parking lot, the gas station down the road, and we're talking about it. And again, he was surprised. So I was telling the guy this. I was, yeah, you know, it's like, I'm not going to beat a leader bike, but I can certainly beat 600s, and the only 750 I ever ran against, I soundly beat him. So then the other guy pipes up, yeah, I wouldn't beat this 700, 750. My top speed's 185. And I just laughed in his face. I'm like, no, it isn't. I was like, you might do 171, maybe, if you got a tune and a pipe. Like a legit, not what the Speedo says. Nah, mine's making 200 horsepower at the wheel. And then I just had a belly laugh. I was like, am I being punked? I was like, come on, dude. There's no way. I said, where's your boost? Let me see the NOS bottle in the turbo or the supercharger. I'm like, there's no way a 750 is making 200 at the wheel. No, I had Chris Moore tune it, and you know, I said, what dyno did you run it on? I said, you went to Brian Livingood, didn't you? Well, yeah, but he didn't do the tuning. Chris Moore, you know, did it. It's got a full exhaust and a cam and an overbore kit. I go, okay, so maybe you're like 140s, low 140s? I was like, a 750 just doesn't have that. I was like, you can go in and completely blueprint that motor, polish the ports, deck the head, race gasket, change the cam, velocity stat. I mean, you can get it up to, I mean, maybe you do all that work. You do basically like a super bike build on the motor. Maybe you'll get 145, 146, maybe. I'm like, that's 55 horsepower short of your claim. I'm like, it's impossible. No, I'm telling you, man, this thing's making 200 at the wheel. All right. So I text Chris Moore. I'm like, what's the fastest, or what's the most powerful, what's the most you have ever gotten out of any 750 build you've ever done? He's like, 140 tops. Replied right away. Right where I said it would be. And it's like, Cameron thought I was being petty. Like, dude, why do you care? Why are you doing that? I'm like, I just do. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying I'm not being irrational, or I'm not being petty. I'm just, when people try flexing and saying shit, it would be like, I told him this example, when someone says, hey, rich got to pay their fair share. the lower and middle class are paying all the taxes. And I'm like, that's just wrong. Here's the IRS. Here's the IRS website. They break it down by income bracket. 1%, the top 1% of the population pays 46% of the federal income tax entire bill. Yeah, but they've got these loopholes and they've got these tax shelters. And I go, yeah, and after all of those things are taken into account, they're still paying 46%. The top 5% of the country pays 66%. The top 10% pays 76%. So your claim that the middle class is the one paying the bill and rich people are... It's like, it's not true. Not true at all in any way. That's the IRS under Biden lying. Were they lying under the last several administrations? Because the numbers go back. They publish it every year. It's public information. And so when people say things, it's like, I just have this. I guess it's a weakness, guilty pleasure, whatever you want to call it. I just don't have it in me to just let it slide. Someone says something that's just patently stupid, I have a laugh, and I'm like, no, that's not accurate. I have nothing against the guy. He's probably a nice guy, but I'm looking at him, and he's a fairly stout guy. He's kind of a big dude, not necessarily muscular, although he might be strong. But I mean, he's kind of a fat dude, and I'm like, your 750 is not doing 185. It wouldn't do 185 if you were at 35,000 feet and dropped it out of an airplane. It isn't going to hit that speed. Like, it's just not. And it's less about someone saying it. It's more about, like, well, why? When you lie about something like that, because he knows it doesn't make 200 horsepower, he just wants to tell everybody it does so he can brag and pretend that he's got... It's like, if you want 200 horsepower, buy one of these, put in velocity stacks, an air filter, and a full exhaust, and have Chris tune it. You will make 200 horsepower on this, or a Gixxer 1000, or an S1000RR. Those will hit a legit 200 horsepower at the wheel with basically bolt-ons and a tune. A little bit more if you want to tune it for MR12 or race gas. But then that shit eats at your hoses and tanks, and if you don't drain it after each ride, stuff like that. So... But it's like, who are you flexing for? If you're flexing for other bikers, most of them are going to know you're full of shit. And to non-bikers, well, they don't care. Like, they don't know, oh, okay, that sounds like a high number, but they don't know that it's fake, but they also don't know what other bikes make, so it's kind of irrelevant. And it just bugs me. People walk around and just blurt out dumb shit like that. And then when you call them on it, and you're just trying to be nice, you're like, dude, come on. No, man, you don't know what you're talking about. It does 200. So I text the guy who he claims did the build, and he's like, yeah, 140 was all it got. It's like, what more proof do you want? You're trying to give credit to this famous engine builder and tuner and world record holding drag racer. I'm like, well, if anybody could do it, it's going to be Chris. But I'm like, I just know the limits of the 750. Like, it's only 150 cc's more than a 600. You are not getting that without a full, and I mean a serious build and turbo and reinforcing the bottom. I mean, there's a lot that would have to go into that, and it probably wouldn't last long. But I'm like, Isle of TT race bikes don't make that, and not the 600s or 750s. I don't even know if there is a 750 class if they do that, but I'm like, there's physics. There's no way. It's not possible. So then that just annoys me. It's like, anyway. Just thought I would mention that, because it's always the 600 guys, and now I guess it's the 750 guys. And they're usually the same crowd that, because they're buying older bikes, they can't afford the new bike. And that's fine. I mean, buy what you can afford. Buy what's in your budget. But because they're buying older bikes, they don't have any electronics, they don't have ABS. And they're the guys that are always, you know, oh, nobody needs that. You know, I've been talking about this for a long time, and it was really cool to see 44 Teeth. If you don't subscribe to their YouTube channel, man, do it. These guys are racers. They used to race pro, semi-pro. They still do like semi-pro racing. They get invited to all the press launches for all the bikes, and they're basically like an online magazine. They're like MCN, Motorcycle News, Cycle World. 44 Teeth is just another one of those. They're out of the UK, and they're funny as shit. Really nice guys, really funny. Also very realistic, very down to earth, no bullshit. They go through the good, the bad, from a racer and a street rider's perspective. They just kind of do a really good job. So they were invited out for the new Panaigale V4S, which is stunning. And they were invited to do the press launch on, I don't remember which track it was. Oh, it was Mugello, something over there in Europe. And, you know, like a legit big racetrack. And it was pouring rain. So they couldn't really test the bike to its full potential. So what do these guys do? They switch gears and say, you know what? Everybody thinks electronics slow you down because most people don't understand electronics. Like, well, how does traction control work? Well, it cuts power. Oh, if it cuts power, it must make you slower. No. That's not how it works. It cuts power to the point that traction is restored. Because spinning ain't winning. That's why my $500 Corvette my $400 or my 500 horsepower. Sorry, someone trying to fucking call me in the middle of this. So it's I hate that. I gotta do, when I vlog, I gotta just turn off my comm system because someone always calls me with a dumb question. Probably Jimmy. So what was I saying? Oh, there's a reason why on the street on a day like today, if you line up my bone stock C8 Corvette making 500 horsepower against a Dodge Demon, if we're both running the OEM tires and everything like that, we're both stock, my car is going to destroy that Demon off the line. Eventually, if we had half a mile, maybe, he'll catch up. But by the time he comes out of the hole, I'm 100 yards down the road already. And he's got to try to... And he'll still be slipping and sliding. It's not about how much power you have. It's about how much power can you use. My car can use more of its power off the line because I've got the weight of a 6.2-liter Chevy V8 engine and the 8-speed dual clutch all sitting on top of the motor. Or, I'm sorry, all sitting on top of the rear axle. Like a Porsche 911. All that weight in the mid-engine car cramming the back tires, the 305s, into the ground. I have all that traction. My car barely spins coming off the line. It chirps, and then it's like, boom. It's like, it just sticks you in the seat. It's like, it's almost, I mean, the closest thing I've ever felt in a car to that, honestly, is an EV. Like an all-wheel drive EV. You get a little chirp for a fraction of a second, and then it just hooks, and you're gone. Well, that Demon's sitting there roaring, and yeah, it looks glorious. It's probably fun, but it's not fast off the line unless you got a drag pack and you're sitting on a prep surface and your tires are hot. All those things have to come together so that it can actually use all that power. Motorcycles are no, it's the same principle. It's not about what you have, it's what can you use. And so, if your back tire's spinning up and your back end is sliding out, having the engine, having the ECU in 2 milliseconds faster, by the time you realize, oh, there's a problem, it's too late. The ECU will have already sensed the issue. It's actually getting into the world of predictive based on pitch and yaw, where your throttle is and temperature. It's actually getting fairly good at predicting a pending slide, impending, and mitigating it before it happens. And guess what? If your tires are spinning or you're sliding, You're not going as fast as you could be. You're not as much as control as you could be. If you're coming into a turn on the street and you lock the front tire, bad things going to happen. Especially on the road where you've got gravel and oil and coolant and wet leaves and all kinds of shit. So they did a test. They were like, does the electronics make you faster or slower? And so they're out there in the rain on a 214 horsepower Ducati Panaigale, and they did their best laps they could manage without crashing with the electronics off, and then they turned them on. And they were 4 to 5 seconds per lap faster with the traction control cutting in. And we know this with cars and ABS, that all these systems have made, things faster and safer and all that good stuff. But people still want to sit there and argue about it. And it's like, dude. Anyway, so his car sounded good, but it's not fast. RT is probably just the 5.7. Actually, a 600 would beat that. Anyway, so I hear people just saying things, and I always take the time to correct them. And I know it's meaningless, and I'm probably not going to win any hearts and minds by telling someone they're being stupid, but 600s aren't that fast. They're very quick, they're agile, they're amazing little bikes. They're a lot of fun. But they're not that fast. Not in today's world. You get you got to put a pipe and a tune on a 600, and most of them are going to make 115, 118, something like that. The 636, apparently, if you do the velocity stacks and a bunch of stuff, more can get it up in the low 20s, 120s. That's fast. But I mean, it's 10 horsepower more than 600s were making 20 years ago with a pipe and a tune. Meanwhile, cars have gone from 200 horsepower to 400 horsepower to 600 horsepower. It's like cars have gotten really fast. There's GTR. Forget the exotics and Lambos and all that shit. I mean, even a freaking a Camry today makes 300 something horsepower. Mustangs are making 500 horsepower. Corvettes. You don't have to spend. There's Hyundais that are, the Stinger all-wheel drive making 360 horsepower. There's a lot of quick cars out there. But I'm a huge believer in electronics. If this thing didn't have, you could say, well, ABS, okay, yes, you could ride it without ABS because people rode fast bikes before ABS was a thing. But honestly, this bike, if it's making 185 or 188 something at the crank or at the wheel, that means it's well over 200 at the crank. And to ride a bike like that today, without any kind of electronic rider aids, can you do it? Yeah. But it's going to be a fucking handful, and it's only a matter of time until you freaking kill yourself. And so, when I see people making those kind of claims, then I almost feel obligated to say something, because it's like, dude, you're going to get yourself killed, or someone else who's new and is reading your comments going, yeah, I don't need to spend extra for this or for that. I can handle a leader bike with no electronics as a new rider. And you're like, dude, you're just asking to die. This is a bike that requires respect. And it requires some skill to ride it. I'm not going to claim to be a freaking pro. But I've ridden enough big, fast bikes and stuff over the years and tracked them, and I wouldn't want a bike like this without ABS on the street. If this is going to be a dedicated race bike and I was going to really put in time to learn, really up my pace, Okay, I can see where their ABS might not be desirable on the track. But I sure as shit want quick shifters and auto blip and traction control and slide control and all that other stuff. And if you're on the road and you think you don't need ABS, you'll find out the hard way at some point. At some point, someone will pull in front of you. Something will happen. There'll be something in the road that compromises traction, and you'll grab a handful of brake, and you're going to be eating pavement. You ride a bike long enough, it's going to happen. And I'm not saying you can't crash with ABS and all that stuff, but anything that I can do to mitigate risk, anything I can do to make my ride safer, make sure that me and my bike make it home in one piece. I'm not sitting paralyzed in a hospital room and my bike's down in a ravine. Anything that can make me faster on track, or if I get caught out in the rain, it looks like a nice day out. Happens a lot in Atlanta. 1% chance of rain. I leave the house, get up on the mountains. Oh, and there's thunderstorms everywhere. And you're like, all right, well now what? And having a 200, a bike that makes this kind of crazy power, even a bike that makes 100 horsepower at the wheel, that is way more than you need to get you into trouble. Then you throw in wet pavement. If it just started raining, so you got some of that like oil and coolant and shit on the frickin' floating on top. Absolutely you want electronic systems. You want ABS and you probably want traction control. I think it's fucking stupid that people sit here and downplay those systems. It's like, do you know how many millions of dollars these companies spend on this stuff? R&D, testing, all that stuff, to make these bikes not only perform at a level that is just staggering, but also to make sure that they're safe, that they don't kill their owners. They want return customers. You can't do that if you're paralyzed or missing a leg or in the grave, right? So you need, when you're making bikes that are fast like that, and even 600s, I keep saying how they're not stupid. No, obviously 150 plus miles per hour is triple what you need to kill yourself with. But any of these bikes ridden at a pace, you want that stuff. So I see people saying, no you don't, then you don't really know how to ride. More often than not, it'll be some guy in Florida who thinks he's fast because he's never seen a turn. The only turn he's ever taken is pulling into his driveway. And all he does is run up and down the highway and flip-flop in shorts, talking about how fast he is in a straight line. And it's like, dude, you suck. You're not that fast. Put him on track. Have him drive with us up in the mountains. And 90% plus of them will be so goddamn slow. You'll be waiting forever for them to catch up. It doesn't mean, we're better than them. It just, going in a straight line is not a big deal. All it takes is balls or a lack of common sense. And you can probably use those two things interchangeably. You just have to be willing to accept the risk that, you could die or go to jail. But the bike's made to go fast in a straight line, but the bike's also made to go fast in the turns. And in order to do that effectively, they've developed these electronics packages to make you faster and safer. And thinking that, there's no benefit to that, you're a pussy if you need that. Shut up. All the racers in the world use everything other than ABS, because on track at a race pace, ABS could kick in and cause you to go deeper into the turn and miss the apex. Doesn't mean it's like unsafe or you'll crash. It just means it'll hurt your lap time more often than not. That's it. All those other systems, slide control, wheelie control, traction control, launch control, they have all of those. Unless it's a vintage class, you're not going to find a race bike in any race paddock anywhere in the world that doesn't have all those systems on it. There's a reason for that. If they are good enough for Marquez and Jorge Martin and all these people that are some of the best riders the world has ever seen, then some dickhead on a ratted out Gixxer 600 in Florida riding around in a wife beater, to think that he's above those things is just stupid. And so for that reason, I always feel compelled like I should correct people. On some level, maybe I'm just hoping that my talking some sense to them might actually save someone's life. Someone might go, you know what, that's actually a good point. Maybe I should put on some gear and not disable the electronics. Why do you think Mustangs and cars are always flying in a crowd? There's no shortage of videos because they're trying to do a burnout. They turn off the electronics, and then they can't handle the car, and now their car's trashed and they ran over somebody. It's just like, it's the same thing. Performance vehicles, two-wheeled or four, are so beyond the actual ability of most of us, including myself, that thinking you don't need the electronics, you're just being a muppet, and you're asking for trouble. And when you do that, I don't have any sympathy. If you're in an accident that could have easily been avoided, but you let your ego, I don't want that electronic nanny stuff. All right, well, now you're missing a leg and your bike is toast. Like, congrats, I guess. Anyway, I don't know if I'll be back. See if I can think of anything else to talk about.